gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to this rather quickly called press conference. But we thought it was very important to discuss this issue in a timely manner and to make our concerns known to the media and thus to the wider Jamaica. My name is Carolyn Gomes. I'm the Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice, and it's my task this afternoon to welcome you. Thank you for coming, and to introduce the members of the head table. With me are Mrs. Susan Goffe, our chairperson, on my right.
Sorry, 1 second. I'm going to shift these microphones so we can hear you.
With me this afternoon are Mrs. Susan Goffe, our chairperson. Beside her, Mr. Terrence Williams, Commissioner of the Independent Commission of Investigations. Mr. Earl Witter, Public Defender, is trying to be here. He also had a previous engagement, but he says he's trying to reorganize to be here because he thinks it's very important and feels strongly about the issue. And beside Mr. Williams is Mr. Horace Levy, well known to all of you, former senior lecturer at university, but now speaking in his personal capacity, though he remains a member of the Peace Management Initiative, and he's also a member of the steering committee of the Jamaica Civil Society Coalition. We call this press conference because of the spate of police killings, and I'm going to hand you over now to Mrs. Susan Goffe to speak on our behalf. She will be followed, as you see from the agenda, by Mr. Williams, and then by Mr. Levy. If the public defender comes, then of course we put him in on the program.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Jamaicans for Justice is dismayed by the fact that since March the 1st of this year, our police force has killed 21 persons, including 10 in a 24-hour period between March the 1st and 2nd. Among that number is a young teenage girl killed yesterday in Denham Town. The number of deaths in that period is, with the exception of the Morant Bay Rebellion and the Tivoli Incursions in 2001 and 2010, the largest loss of life at the hands of the state since the end of slavery. The police are only justified to use lethal force in the rarest of circumstances, which are limited to using force only when strictly necessary and to the extent required for the performance of their duty. This means that a death at the hands of the police should be a rare occurrence. Unfortunately, in Jamaica, this has not been the case. Our police have an abysmal record of killing of citizens, many in circumstances which are disputed or clearly unjustifiable. In the last 4 years, our police have killed a total of 1,126 persons. A police operation that ends in a death is a failure of policing. However, the last 6 days have seen a particularly egregious number of police fatal shootings. That 21 persons should have lost their lives is bad enough. That these deaths have occurred at the hands of those sworn to protect, serve, and reassure is appalling and completely unacceptable. It is untenable in any society that the police force should be resorting to that level of violence in order to control crime. The determination of the complete circumstances surrounding these killings is yet to be made, but in almost every instance, the community and/or eyewitnesses have disputed the account of the killings and called the deaths unjustifiable. And just one statistic that I'd like to put in here. In the first 3 days of March, according to the JCF figures, 9 murders took place. In that same 3-day period, 13 people were killed by the police. JFJ recognizes that the police are operating in the context of a high incidence of violent crime and often have very difficult situations to handle. But we condemn any actions that may occur outside the rule of law. Police operations can and must be conducted with adequate preparation to severely reduce any chance of loss of life or injury. We insist that every operation conducted which results in the loss of life is a failure of policing. That so many of the operations of our police fail to meet this basic standard shows a lack of professionalism of the force and the far way that we must travel to be able to properly police this country. All studies done, including the recently released report by the UNDP on human development and the shift to better citizen security, point out that the heavy-fisted approach to policing, which sees the abuse or curtailment of rights as a solution to increasing crime, has failed, not only in Jamaica, but across the region. Our police must not use Jamaica's history of a high incidence of violent crime as a reason to commit or excuse extrajudicial killings. The society and its leaders must insist that those who act outside the law are held to account for their actions. Our police must stop insisting on implementing failed rights-abusive strategies and instead engage in respectful rights-based policing which sees the law-abiding members of communities as partners in delivering security rather than the enemy to be eliminated. The Commissioner of Police must immediately remove all police involved in the recent incidents from frontline duty, and they must remain off frontline duty until the courts have determined that they acted legally. He must also immediately issue orders to his men reminding them that, quote, the use of force is a serious responsibility, end of quote, that in, quote, no case should the use of force which is disproportionate to the legitimate objective to be achieved be used or authorized. And this is stated in the police use of force and firearm policy. The Minister of National Security must make it clear to all levels of the police that the killing of civilians by police is not an acceptable part of any crime reduction strategy, and immediately move to implement the sustained, resourced, and focused crime prevention strategies and social interventions coupled with sensible, trustworthy policing and improved administration of justice, to which he recently committed. We ask that the Minister support Indicom's efforts to conduct thorough investigations and determine whether those incidents are justified or not, and to ensure that, quote, individual officers are accountable and responsible for whatever force they use and must be in a position to justify their actions in the light of their legal responsibilities and powers. Again, to quote the use of force guidelines. We urge all those with pertinent information on these incidents, both civilian and police, to provide Indicom with that information as soon as possible. This orgy of bloodletting by the police must end now. As Martin Luther King Jr. so eloquently put it 50 years ago, we cannot murder murder. Thank you.
Mr. Williams?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Gomes and Mrs. Goffe, for the invitation to attend here at Jamaicans for Justice on this sad occasion when we record a high level of fatalities caused by the police. A record high level outside of state of emergency or the Tivoli Incursion of 2007. 1997. What year am I? 1997. My years are getting tough. Are getting crossed.
2007.
2007, yes.
2000.
Yes. Jamaicans want to feel confidence in their security forces. They want to be able to know and be assured that when the security forces take life, that it is justified. The only way they can feel that confidence is if there is accountability in the force and there is an impartial investigation of incidents where lives are taken. That is an investigation which is outside of the police force by persons unconnected to the police force. It is clear that for many years Jamaicans have lost that confidence. It is for that reason the police force is not treated with the same public regard as, say, the army is treated in polls on that issue. There have been many miscarriages of justice where cases brought against police officers have failed for a variety of reasons, and people wonder whether justice is equal in Jamaica. There have been many times that incidents have occurred and persons have seen years pass before there is any action taken regarding those incidents. They have seen situations where police officers to be charged have, during this long period between the incident and them being charged, have fled the country and have therefore put themselves away or away from the reach of the justice system. INDECOM's role is to return that confidence by having impartial investigations. The trouble is, the public generally might soon lose faith in INDECOM and its role, because we are increasingly being overburdened by the amount and the nature of incidents, and in some instances the lack of cooperation on the ground from police and police officers involved and not involved in the incident. This current upsurge has put great pressure on our staff, and I would like to publicly commend the staff of INDECOM for the work that they have done. They come out at night, they come out at all hours of the day, go into difficult areas, sometimes when hostilities have not yet even subsided. They do so without any, without being armed or having any sort of protection. And they go on these scenes where sometimes they are met by the police who do not cooperate with them in the investigation. But yet, my staff have resolutely done their work, and I would like to applaud them for that. Yesterday, at the incident in Western Kingston, they went on the scene, and whilst there, hostilities resumed, and they had to leave that scene. They did further investigation as they could by going to the morgue and checking on the bodies of persons who had already been carried there. And even then they had to retreat and return to office. And it was in the late evening that they were able to return to that scene to process it. We want to deliver to Jamaica a high-class service where at the end of the day, Jamaicans can be assured with some amount of promptitude whether a shooting was justified, and if it was not, that persons face the court for their role in those shootings. What do we need? From the Commissioner of Police, I would like to publicly ask him to continue our cooperation that we have at our level and to implore the members of his force to comply with the law, which, for example, says that INDECOM must take charge of the scenes of incidents. We have had 3 incidents in recent time where the police force have refused to permit us to take charge of the scene. When they refuse, we cannot, of course, take charge of the scene by force. All we can do is prepare statements and prepare a case for submission. In that case, we cannot guarantee whether that scene has been properly processed or whether the exhibits from the scene are the right ones which have been taken to the laboratory. So we ask the Commissioner of Police to cause his members to obey the law with regards to who has charge of the scenes. We ask the force generally to recognize that INDECOM's role is not an advocacy group like Jamaicans for Justice who have their proper role to play. We are an impartial investigative group. And we are not out to get the police. We are out to search in each case for the truth. And in the long run, of course, the decision will be for the courts. We just present and prepare the case. To the government, we ask recognition that although we are in a period of budgetary constraint, that INDECOM requires greater resources so that we can increase our investigative staff. We need reform of the legislation to ensure that we can fully operate independently of the police force. So say, for example, the conduct of identification procedures to indicate who are the police officers who are at a scene, that we can do those ourselves and do not need to rely on the police force to do them for us. And we believe that by legislation, many of the issues which are now considered unclear about INDECOM's powers could be made pellucidly clear. We also note that it is some time now that we have called upon the police force and the Minister of National Security to consider the issue of mask wearing amongst members of the police force, making the point that in our considered view it is not legal, as it is not permitted in the police force book of rules, and also to consider the issue of police officers not always wearing their numbers on their uniforms. We have seen pictures of the incidents yesterday, and on the pictures I saw, the police officers displayed no numbers on their uniforms, so there was no way that someone could identify that police officer unless he had a relationship with the officer sometime prior. This practice leads to anonymity, which leads to impunity. We have been speaking on these issues for some time, and we have made recommendations to the police force regarding them, particularly noting that when police officers wear some form of kit, including the neon high visibility vest and some pouches, that they do not display their numbers. We have asked them to display numbers on ballistic vests and on high visibility vests, and also on their helmets, which is a common practice in some overseas police forces. The Commissioner of Police has decided not to comply with that recommendation, and we shall be forwarding that issue to Parliament. And we hope that Parliament and the Minister will consider the issue and realize that you can have strong policing but yet be accountable, yet the police be accountable for their actions. INDECOM is not calling for the police to step down from their duty. We realize that they have an onerous duty in Jamaica, particularly with a high level of violent crime. What we're calling for is respect for life, and recognition that respect for life means that the state has an obligation to ensure that where an agent takes life, that this is properly, impartially, and effectively investigated. INDECOM is prepared to do the task, but we are asking that there be no ambiguity in the fact that we are supported in that mission. So, in closing, we regret the loss of life, not because we are saying it was unjustified, because we do not know now whether it was justified or unjustified, but we regret any loss of life. And we hope that we'll be able to bring some resolution to these matters. Some cases have shown, for example, the fatal shooting of Mr. Hill in Negril, that if we get forensic evidence early, we are able to close investigations in a matter of 8 weeks in that case. Sadly, in other cases, we have not been able to have all of these elements work quickly. And therefore, we still have many cases on our docket which are over 2 years old. Again, I thank Jamaicans for Justice for inviting us here, and I would like Jamaica to know that INDECOM remains committed to the task at hand. Thank you very much.
I too want to thank Jamaicans for Justice for inviting me to speak here. I'm not, of course, speaking on behalf of any of the organizations that I belong to. I'm a member of Peace Management Initiative, the Institute for Criminal Justice and Security at the University of the West Indies, and of course the Jamaica Coalition, Civil Society Coalition, and I'm not speaking on their behalf, of course. I concur entirely with the statement made by Jamaicans for Justice. I just want to add a couple of points which reinforce some of what the Commissioner has said in his very strong statement, for which I do want to thank him also. The killings, 21 in a week after the outrages. I want to point to a couple of the reasons why so many killings in such a short time have occurred. Two, really. The first one is the tacit approval by the leadership of the police, and implicitly by the state, of a type of policing that has flourished in the Jamaica Constabulary Force from the time of its inception. I'm yet to hear from Commissioner Ellington any word of caution to the force in respect of the high number of police killings over the past 2 years. I'm yet to hear that. And along with that, of course, rose the absence of any rebuke for the massive killing that took place in May 2010. It's not accidental that the latest wave of killings, the 6 that occurred yesterday, occurred in Denham Town, which adjoins Tivoli Gardens, and involves young men identified as having been part of the system there, the posse. And of course, along with that failure of the police, there's a failure of the state to institute rapid and secure court operations that will bring people to justice who are charged for serious crimes. As long as that situation continues, then people are going to take other actions. The second reason, of course, is the tacit and open approval by many Jamaicans for that kind of police behavior. We see it in their reaction to the thefts and other types of crime. Mention the word criminal and the reaction is kill them. So, you know, as long as Jamaicans feel that way, many of them, not all by any means, but a significant number, then the police feel justified in proceeding. They feel they have support, and the state too. So finally, there really has to be some halt to this kind of behavior. And I support the call for the Minister of National Security to do something in that regard. Basically, one has to appreciate that police killings of this sort have been going on for several decades and have not changed anything. They have not brought the homicide rate down. Right? Only mad people continue to pursue a course of action which has the same result and you know, refuse to change that course of action. It's only when the police and the state begin to show respect for human life that the homicide rate will come down, because the homicide rate is based on a very low esteem for human life in this country. That is the basis of it. Human life doesn't count. And if the police continue to set the example that human life is really cheap, take it any old time, and you know, compete with the criminals for the number of killings over the past week, then we will continue to see the high homicide rate that Jamaica has. Thank you very much.
I would just like now, the public defender did anticipate that he might not be able to reach her in time for this press conference. And so he asked me to convey a specific statement to you. He said, and I quote, "I am no less alarmed than Jamaicans for Justice by the phenomenal rate of killing over such a short period of time. What is required of the government is the earliest intervention at the level of the Police High Command to remind the Commissioner of Police that it is his duty to enforce his use of force and firearms policy. That policy emphasizes that killing may only be justified under the law and Constitution by self-defense or the defense of others." End quote.